Greg wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the nutrient levels in Base 7. The hydroponic plants looked healthy, their green leaves spreading wide under the artificial lights. He had been working in the agriculture section of New Haven Colony for 3 years now, and he liked the quiet routine of it. No drama, no complications, just plants and numbers and the satisfaction of watching things grow. The communication panel on the wall beeped 3 times. That was the emergency signal. Greg frowned and pressed the button. "All colonists report to the main plaza immediately," the voice said. It was Commander Wells, the colony leader. "This is mandatory, no exceptions." Greg sighed and saved his work. Mandatory assemblies were rare. The last one had been 6 months ago when a meteor shower damaged the eastern water processors. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the plaza. New Haven was home to 2,000 humans, spread across a valley on a planet the survey teams had named 442C. That had helped them establish the colony 15 years ago, back when Earth was just starting to send people to other star systems. There were tall, thin aliens with gray skin and large black eyes. They moved slowly and spoke carefully, always seeming to calculate their words before speaking. The plaza was already filling with people when Greg arrived. He spotted his friend Lisa Carter near the fountain and made his way over to her. "Any idea what this is about?" Greg asked. Lisa shook her head. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail and she looked worried. "Nothing good, probably. They never call everyone together unless something serious is happening." More colonists streamed into the plaza. Greg recognized most of them. Daniel Hayes, who worked in mining operations, Amy Brooks from the medical center, Martin, one of the security officers. Stevens caught his eye from across the plaza and smiled. Greg smiled back, feeling his face warm slightly. He had been seeing for 2 years now, though they had not made anything official. They began to arrive. There were about 50 of them living in New Haven, serving as advisors and liaisons to the Galactic Council. They moved through the crowd in their slow, deliberate way, taking positions around the edge of the plaza. Ambassador stepped onto the raised platform at the center of the plaza. He was the senior representative, the one who handled all major colony decisions. His large eyes swept across the assembled humans. "Thank you for gathering," said. His voice was high and melodic, translated through the small device on his chest. "We have important news to share, news that will affect every member of this colony." The crowd grew quiet. Greg felt a knot forming in his stomach. "Your colony has reached what the Galactic Council terms reproductive maturity threshold," continued. "You have been established for 15 years. Your population has stabilized. Your infrastructure is complete. According to galactic law, you must now implement standard reproductive protocols." Greg glanced at Lisa. She looked as confused as he felt. "What does that mean?" someone shouted from the crowd. Raised one long hand. "It means you will participate in the mating lottery system, as all species do when they establish permanent settlements on new worlds." The plaza erupted in noise. People started talking all at once, some asking questions, others expressing shock. Greg felt like he had been punched in the gut. "Please, allow me to explain," said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The mating lottery is a proven system used by 847 known species across the galaxy. It ensures genetic diversity and colony health. Our computers analyze your genetic information. They calculate compatibility scores. They determine optimal pairings." "Wait," Commander Wells stepped forward. "You're saying you're going to assign us partners, tell us who to mate with." "That is correct," said, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "The system is very sophisticated. It considers genetic markers, health indicators, psychological compatibility factors, and projected offspring viability. The results are extremely accurate." Greg felt sick. He looked around the plaza and saw his own shock reflected on dozens of faces. This could not be happening. "What if we refuse?" Lisa called out. tilted his head, a gesture that Greg had learned meant confusion. Refuse. I do not understand. This is how colonies function. This is galactic standard. If you refuse to participate, you will have restricted breeding rights. You will not be permitted to reproduce outside the assigned pairings. This is insane, Daniel Hayes said loudly. You can't just assign people to each other like we're breeding stock. It is not insane, replied calmly. It is logical. It is efficient. It is what every successful colony does. Your parent species on Earth may have used different methods, but you are a colony now. You follow colony protocols. Commander Wells looked like she wanted to argue, but she closed her mouth. Greg knew what she was thinking. The colony depended on for technology, for trade connections, for protection. Defying the Galactic Council could mean losing all of that. The lottery will be conducted in 3 days, announced. You will all receive genetic compatibility reports. The drawing ceremony will be held here in the plaza. Assigned couples will have 1 month to formalize their bonds and begin the reproduction process. 1 month? Amy Brooks sounded horrified. You expect us to just accept some stranger as a life partner in 1 month? The computer pairings are very accurate, assured her. Stranger is a temporary condition. You will adapt. The assembly dissolved into chaos after that. People argued and shouted and demanded answers. The simply stood there, watching with their large dark eyes, clearly not understanding why the humans were so upset. Greg pushed through the crowd until he reached. She grabbed his hand, and he felt her trembling. This can't be real, she whispered. They can't actually do this. I think they can, Greg said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. I think they're going to. Lisa found them a few minutes later. Her face was pale. Did you see the way they were looking at us, like we were children throwing a tantrum? They don't understand, said. They really think this is normal. Greg looked around the plaza. They were still standing at the edges, observing. Ambassador remained on the platform, calmly answering questions from colonists who approached him. Everything about their body language suggested patience with confused primitives. 3 days, Greg said quietly. We have 3 days before they draw names and assign us to strangers. There has to be something we can do, Lisa said. There has to be a way to stop this. But as Greg looked at their calm certainty and their absolute confidence that this was right and proper and normal, he felt a cold dread settling in his chest. These aliens had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They had helped establish colonies on hundreds of worlds. They genuinely believed they were helping humanity by implementing this system. And in 3 days, Greg would find out who the computers had decided he should spend the rest of his life with. The thought made him want to scream. He squeezed his hand and tried not to think about what would happen if the lottery assigned him to someone else. The 3 days passed too quickly. Greg barely slept. He spent most of his time in the hydroponics bay, trying to lose himself in work, but his mind kept wandering to the lottery. Every time he saw, they both knew they might be assigned to other people. Neither of them wanted to talk about it. The morning of the lottery arrived gray and cold. Greg stood in his small apartment, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes, hair messy, jaw tight with tension. He forced himself to put on clean clothes and headed to the plaza. They had transformed the space. Large screens floated in the air, displaying complex genetic charts that Greg could not understand. A raised platform stood in the center with a podium. Rows of seats had been set up, forcing the colonists into organized sections. It felt like a courtroom. Greg found a seat near the back. Lisa sat down next to him, followed by. None of them spoke. All around them, colonists sat in nervous silence. Some people held hands with their current partners. Others sat alone, staring at the screens with fear in their eyes. Ambassador stepped onto the platform. Behind him, a dozen others took positions along the edge. Greg noticed something odd. More had arrived than he had ever seen in one place. They stood perfectly still, all facing the crowd, all watching. "We will now begin the lottery drawing," announced. "Each name will be called in order of optimal genetic contribution to colony health. When your name is called, please stand. Your assigned partner will be displayed on the screen. You will have 1 week to report to the medical center for formal bonding procedures." The first name appeared on the screen: Daniel Hayes. Daniel stood slowly from his seat in the front section. He was a big man, muscular from years of mining work. His face was blank. The screen changed. Assigned partner Amy Brooks, genetic compatibility score 92%. Amy gasped. She was sitting 3 rows away from Daniel. They had never even spoken to each other as far as Greg knew. She stood on shaking legs. "Please approach the platform," said. Daniel and Amy walked to the platform like prisoners walking to execution. They stood side by side, not looking at each other. They began recording data on their devices. "Your bonding appointment is scheduled for next Tuesday," told them. "You may sit down." They returned to their seats. Amy was crying silently. Daniel's jaw was clenched so tight that Greg could see the muscles twitching from across the plaza. More names were called. Martin was assigned to a woman named Helen Price from the engineering section. A botanist named was paired with Susan Moore, one of the shuttle pilots. Each couple looked more miserable than the last. Some people protested, arguing that they barely knew their assigned partners. They simply repeated that the computer pairings were accurate and they would adapt. Greg felt's hand slip into his. Her palm was sweaty. He held on tight. "Greg," the screen displayed his name. Greg's heart stopped. He stood up, his legs feeling like water. Every eye in the plaza turned to him. He walked toward the platform, forcing himself to breathe. The screen flickered. Greg looked up, expecting to see some woman's name appear, but instead the screen showed something different. "Participant may select from compatible pool." Greg stared at the screen. Below the message, 47 different names appeared, all women. Each had a small genetic compatibility score next to their name, ranging from 85 to 94%. The plaza went completely silent. "I don't understand," Greg said, his voice echoing in the stillness. Ambassador was staring at Greg with an intensity that made his skin crawl. All that had stopped what they were doing. They were all looking at him. "Your genetic profile contains an unprecedented trait," said slowly. "The computer has identified something we have never encountered before." "What trait?" Greg asked. "The ability to consciously choose your partner," replied. "The computer analysis shows that you possess strong voluntary selective breeding instinct. This is remarkable. This is extraordinary." Greg felt 2,000 eyes on him. "I don't understand what that means." "It means you can choose," said. "From the compatible pool displayed, you may select any partner you wish. The computer has never encountered a genetic profile with this characteristic. In 847 known species across the galaxy, individual choice in mating is not encoded at the genetic level. Yet somehow, you possess this trait." They were all moving now, coming closer to the platform. More aliens appeared in holographic form around the plaza. Greg recognized some of them from their rare visits to the colony, members of the Galactic Council. They materialized as glowing blue projections, all watching him with fascination. "This is unprecedented," one of the holograms said. It was a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish. "A genetic marker for voluntary mate selection. How is this possible?" "We must study this further," another hologram added. Greg felt anger cutting through his confusion. "I'm not some lab specimen, and I don't need a computer to tell me I can choose who I want to be with. That's just normal." "Normal?" His voice rose slightly, the closest thing to excitement Greg had ever heard from him. "No, this is not normal. This is revolutionary. Every known species uses some form of managed reproduction. Genetic algorithms, pheromone matching, elder selection, territorial distribution, but individual conscious choice as a biological trait. This changes everything we understand about reproductive evolution. Greg looked at the list of names on the screen. He saw his name there with a 90% compatibility score. He saw Lisa's name. He saw women he barely knew and women he had never met. "I don't want to choose from a list," Greg said loudly. "I want to choose who I actually care about, who I actually want to be with, not because a computer tells me to." They began talking among themselves in their own language, high-pitched sounds that the translators could not interpret. The holographic aliens were doing the same. Greg stood on the platform, feeling exposed and angry and confused. "You are saying you reject the compatible pool?" asked. "I'm saying I reject all of this," Greg said. His voice was getting stronger now. "I don't need a list of compatible people. I already know who I want to be with. I don't need permission or computer analysis or genetic scores. I just choose." A near the edge of the platform spoke up. "But how do you know your choice will produce optimal offspring? How do you calculate genetic diversity? How do you ensure colony health?" "We don't calculate it," Greg said. "We just live our lives and make our own decisions." The plaza erupted. Colonists started shouting questions. Some were directed at Greg, others at the... Commander Wells pushed her way to the platform. "Ambassador," she said firmly, "I think we need to stop this lottery right now. Greg isn't the only one with this trait. We all have it. Every human here can choose their own partner. That's just how humans work." Turned to stare at Wells. His large eyes seemed even bigger than usual. "All of you, every human possesses voluntary mate selection instinct." "It's not an instinct," Wells replied. "It's a choice, it's freedom. And yes, every human has it." They began talking rapidly among themselves again. The holographic aliens were practically vibrating with excitement. Greg could see more holograms appearing, more species tuning in to watch. "This requires immediate investigation," announced. "We must verify this claim. We must study your species more carefully. The lottery is suspended until we can understand this unprecedented development." Greg finally allowed himself to look at. She was standing now, tears running down her face, but she was smiling. Lisa was next to her, looking stunned. "3 days," said, still staring at Greg like he was the most fascinating thing in the universe. "We will consult with the Galactic Council. We will review Earth's biological data. We will determine if this claim is accurate." Greg stepped down from the platform. Every in the plaza followed him with their eyes. Every hologram tracked his movement. He had never felt so watched in his entire life. As he walked back to his seat, he heard someone laugh. It was Daniel Hayes. "The whole galaxy is staring at you," Daniel said, "because you told them you want to pick your own girlfriend." Greg sat down heavily, grabbed his hand and held on tight. "Is this really happening?" Greg whispered. "I think you just accidentally started a revolution," Lisa replied quietly. On the platform, they continued their discussions. The lottery was over, but something much bigger was just beginning. Greg could not go anywhere without being watched. They followed him with their eyes wherever he went. Even in the hydroponics bay, he would look up to find one of them standing at the window, observing him like he was an exotic plant. 2 days after the lottery disaster, Commander Wells called him to her office. Lisa and Turner, the chief medical officer, were already there. Was a thin man with graying hair and tired eyes. "We have a problem," Wells said without preamble. "I've been going through the colony founding documents, the agreements we signed with the when we established New Haven." And Greg asked. "There's nothing in them about a mating lottery," Wells replied. "Nothing about reproductive management, nothing about assigned partners. They just assumed this was how colonies worked. They implemented it without asking us." Nodded. "I've been reviewing Earth's biological databases. Every human culture in history has practiced individual mate selection. Some cultures arranged marriages, but even then the families chose, not computers, not alien advisors. Humans have always paired based on emotional connection, shared values, physical attraction, mutual respect, not genetic optimization. So they made a mistake, Lisa said. They didn't understand human culture. It's bigger than that, Wells replied. I contacted the Galactic Council this morning, spoke to their cultural liaison. They had no idea humans chose mates individually. They assumed we were like every other species. Managed reproduction is universal across 847 known species. Greg felt a chill run down his spine. We're the only ones who do this differently. Apparently, said, every other species uses some form of reproductive management when establishing colonies. They genuinely thought they were helping us by implementing standard protocols. So what do we do? Greg asked. Wells stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the colony spread across the valley, buildings and farms and green spaces. 2,000 people living their lives. We confront them. We explain that humans don't work this way. We demand they cancel the lottery and let us live according to our own culture. They found Ambassador in the council chamber, surrounded by data screens showing Earth's history. Genetic charts, population maps, cultural analyses. He looked up when they entered. Commander Wells said, I have been studying your species. Fascinating, truly fascinating. We need to talk about the lottery, Wells said firmly. Yes, of course, gestured to the screens. I have reviewed your data. It appears your claim is accurate. Humans do practice individual mate selection. No species in the known galaxy does this. You choose partners based on emotion rather than genetic optimization. This is extraordinary. It's not extraordinary, said. It's just how we are, and we never agreed to change that. Tilted his head in that gesture of confusion. But you are a colony. Colonies follow standardized protocols. This ensures success. This ensures genetic diversity. This ensures proper population management. We don't need population management, Greg said. Humans have been choosing their own partners for hundreds of thousands of years. We've managed just fine. But the data shows inefficiency, argued. He pulled up a chart. Look, incompatible pairings, relationship dissolutions, individuals remaining unpaired despite genetic compatibility with available partners. This is wasteful. It's called freedom, Lisa said quietly. It's called being human. Stared at them with his large, dark eyes. I do not understand. Why would you choose inefficiency? Why would you risk poor genetic outcomes? Why would you allow individuals to make decisions that could harm colony health? Because the alternative is worse, Wells said. Taking away our right to choose who we love, who we commit to, who we build lives with. That would make us something other than human, and we won't accept it. Other species accept it, pointed out. 847 successful spacefaring civilizations use managed reproduction. Why are humans different? Because we are, Greg said simply, and that's not going to change. Was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I must consult with the Galactic Council. This is beyond my authority to decide. If humans truly require individual mate selection to maintain cultural identity, this creates complications. What kind of complications? Wells asked. The Council will need to determine if individual mate selection is a sapient right or merely a cultural practice, explained. If it is a right, then we must revise colony protocols. If it is only culture, then you must adapt to galactic standards like every other colony species. And if we refuse to adapt, Greg asked. His expression became grave. Then you risk your colony status, your trade agreements, your protection, your access to interstellar resources. The Galactic Council takes colony protocols very seriously. The meeting ended badly. Promised to present their case to the council, but he made no guarantees. As they left the chamber, Greg felt the weight of what they had started settling on his shoulders. Word spread through the colony quickly. By evening, the plaza was full of people arguing. Martin had organized a group who thought they should comply with the lottery to maintain good relations with the Galactic Council. "We can't afford to lose Council support," Martin was saying to a crowd. "We depend on them for everything: technology, trade, protection. If we defy them over this, they could withdraw and leave us stranded." "So you just accept being assigned a partner like breeding stock?" Daniel Hayes shouted back. "You'd give up your freedom because you're scared." "I'm being practical," Martin snapped. "Sometimes you have to compromise to survive." Greg found himself at the center of the crowd. People kept looking at him like he was supposed to have answers. Stood next to him, holding his hand. "Greg," someone called out, "you started this. What do you think we should do?" Greg felt every eye turn to him. He had not asked to be the face of this resistance. He had just wanted to choose his own girlfriend without some alien computer telling him who to be with. "I think we stand our ground," Greg said. His voice came out stronger than he felt. "I think we tell them that being human means having the right to choose. And if they don't understand that, if they can't accept that, then maybe we're better off without their help." "Easy to say when you're not the one who'll starve if supply ships stop coming," Martin said angrily. "I'd rather starve free than live well as someone's pet," Greg replied. The argument continued for hours. The colony was dividing. Some sided with Greg, believing that human autonomy was worth fighting for. Others sided with Martin, arguing that survival had to come first. Late that night, Greg sat with and Lisa in the small park near the residential sector. Above them, stars filled the sky. Somewhere out there, 847 species lived and thrived, all following the same basic rules. And here on New Haven, 2,000 humans were about to defy the entire galactic order because they believed in something those other species had never known. "Do you think we're wrong?" asked quietly. "Maybe they are right, maybe we should adapt." "No," Lisa said firmly. "They're not right. Just because everyone else does something doesn't make it right. Humans used to think a lot of things were normal that we figured out were wrong. Slavery, oppression, taking away people's choices. We learned better." "But we're alone in this," said. "The whole galaxy thinks we're crazy." Greg looked up at the stars. "Then maybe it's time the galaxy learned something new." 3 days later, the Galactic Council's response arrived, called another assembly. The plaza filled with nervous colonists. Greg stood near the front this time, no longer trying to hide. Stepped onto the platform. Behind him, 3 holographic figures materialized. One looked like a massive insect with crystalline wings. Another resembled a floating collection of tentacles. The third was completely alien, a geometric pattern that shifted and pulsed. "The Galactic Council has reviewed your petition," announced. "They have sent representatives to observe and evaluate your claims. These observers will spend time studying human relationships and reproductive practices. They will determine if individual mate selection is indeed fundamental to human nature, or if it is simply cultural resistance to change." The insect-like alien spoke, its voice translated through mechanical means. "We will observe. We will analyze. We will make a determination within 30 days. Until then, the lottery remains suspended but not canceled." Greg felt his stomach drop. 30 days of being watched. 30 days of having his entire culture put on trial. 30 days to prove that humans deserve the right to choose their own paths. As the assembly dispersed, he caught watching him again with those large, calculating eyes. There was learning. They all were. The question was, what would they decide humans were worth once they understood them? The Galactic Council representatives arrived 3 days later on a sleek silver ship that landed outside the colony. Greg watched from the observation deck as 3 alien figures emerged. The first was the geneticist. She looked like a large mantis with multiple arms and compound eyes that seemed to see in all directions at once. The second was the sociologist. He was the floating tentacle creature, moving through the air like he was swimming. The third was the legal arbiter. It was the geometric pattern being, constantly shifting between different configurations of light and shape. They moved through the colony like ghosts, observing everything. They attended meals in the dining hall. They watched people work. They sat in corners during conversations. Greg saw them everywhere he went, silently recording and analyzing. On the fourth day, they began conducting interviews. Greg was called to the council chamber first. The three aliens sat across from him, or floated, or pulsed. It was hard to tell with beings so different from anything he knew. "Explain your relationship with Steven," said. Her voice was sharp and clicking, barely smoothed out by the translator. Greg took a deep breath. "We met 2 years ago. She was working on a cultural survey of the local flora. I was delivering nutrient samples from the hydroponics bay. We started talking. We liked talking to each other, so we kept doing it." "You selected her based on conversational compatibility?" asked, his voice like water flowing over rocks. "I guess. I mean, we had things in common. She made me laugh. I made her laugh. We enjoyed spending time together." "But you did not consult genetic compatibility scores?" pressed. "No, I didn't even know those existed." "Then how did you know she was suitable for reproduction?" Greg blinked. That's not why I started seeing her. I just liked her. The rest came later." The aliens exchanged what might have been glances, pulsed in a pattern that the translator said meant, "This is inefficient. You invested time in a relationship without knowing if it would produce viable offspring." "That's how humans work," Greg said. "We don't start relationships to produce offspring. We start them because we care about each other. Sometimes that leads to children. Sometimes it doesn't. But the relationship has value either way." "Value beyond reproduction," sounded genuinely confused. "What value?" "Companionship, support, love, shared experiences, someone to talk to when things are hard, someone to celebrate with when things are good. All of that matters." Made a notation on a device Greg could not identify. "How do you determine genetic compatibility without analysis?" "We don't," Greg admitted. "But humans have been reproducing for hundreds of thousands of years without genetic analysis. Our species survived. We're here talking to you, so it must work well enough." More interviews followed. Daniel Hayes explained how he had been married before joining the colony. His wife had died in an accident during the journey. He described the grief, the loss, the way he still thought about her every day. The aliens seemed baffled that humans formed such strong bonds that they continued to matter even after death. Amy Brooks talked about dating. The concept seemed to break the aliens' understanding completely. She explained how humans spent time with multiple potential partners before making a commitment, how they learned about each other, how they sometimes decided they were not compatible and moved on to try again with someone else. "You invest resources in relationships that do not result in reproduction?" asked, sounding almost horrified. "Most relationships don't result in reproduction," Amy replied. "That doesn't make them worthless. We learn about ourselves. We learn what we want in a partner. We grow as people." Turner was called in to provide scientific testimony. He brought charts and data from Earth, showing human population genetics across thousands of years. "Human genetic diversity is actually higher than most species," explained. "Our choice-based mate selection distributes genes based on real-world success, not theoretical optimization. People who are successful in their environment, who are attractive, who are kind, who are strong, they tend to have more offspring. That's natural selection working through individual choice." "But you have no control," argued. "No planning, no optimization algorithms." "We have something better," said. We have billions of individuals all making independent decisions based on what actually works in the real world. That's more data than any computer could process. The aliens spent a week interviewing colonists. They watched couples interact. They attended a wedding between two colonists who had been together for 5 years. They observed parents with children. They sat in on arguments and reconciliations. Greg saw them watching him, and constantly. They recorded everything: how he held her hand, how she laughed at his jokes, how they cooked dinner together in his small apartment, how they sometimes disagreed and worked through it. One evening, approached Greg in the park. "I must ask you a question that confuses me greatly." "Okay," Greg said. "You and Stevens have been in a committed relationship for 2 years. You have not reproduced. Why?" "We're not ready yet," Greg said. "We're still figuring out if we want to spend our whole lives together." "But you have already spent 2 years together. The genetic compatibility data shows you would produce healthy offspring. Why delay?" Greg tried to find words that would make sense to this alien being. "Because having children is a huge commitment. We want to make sure we're solid first, that our relationship is strong enough to last, that we both really want the same future." "So you test the relationship before reproduction?" "I guess, yeah. But what if you determine you are incompatible? Then you have wasted 2 years." "It wouldn't be wasted," Greg said. "We learned things, we grew, we had good experiences together, and if we split up, we'd both take that knowledge into our next relationships." Was silent for a long moment. "You value the process of selection as much as the outcome." "Maybe more," Greg admitted. "The choosing matters, the journey matters, not just where you end up." The observation period continued. Greg heard that the aliens were particularly fascinated by a couple named Peter Grant and Sophie, who had been married for 10 years and had 3 children. They had met before joining the colony, had chosen each other despite coming from very different backgrounds, and had built a stable, happy life together. "Your compatibility score is only 78%, told them during an interview. "Yet your relationship appears highly successful. How?" Sophie laughed. "Numbers don't tell you everything. Peter makes me better, I make him better. We work on our relationship every day. That matters more than some genetic score." "But this requires effort," said. "Computational pairings eliminate the need for such work." "The work is part of what makes it valuable," Peter replied. "We chose each other. We keep choosing each other every day. That means something." 2 weeks into the observation period, Ambassador approached Greg in the hydroponics bay. The looked troubled, as much as his alien face could show emotion. "I have been speaking with the council representatives," said. "They are struggling to understand your species." "I know," Greg said. "We're struggling to help them understand." They keep returning to the same question. If individual mate selection is so important to humans, why? What evolutionary advantage does it provide? Why would natural selection favor such an inefficient system? Greg set down the nutrient dispenser he had been calibrating. Maybe it's not about efficiency. Maybe it's about something else. What else could matter more than efficiency? Happiness, freedom, the ability to shape our own lives. Those things matter to humans, maybe more than optimal genetic outcomes. Was quiet. Then he said, "The council will make their determination in 1 week. The representatives will present their findings. A decision will be made about whether humans must adapt to galactic standards or if you will be permitted to maintain your unique practices. And if they decide against us, then the lottery will proceed," said simply, "and humans will become like every other colony species, managed, optimized, standard." After left, Greg stood alone in the hydroponics bay, surrounded by growing plants. He thought about the 2 years they had spent together, the long conversations, the quiet moments, the way she smiled when she saw him. None of that could be captured in a genetic compatibility score. None of that could be calculated by an algorithm. If the Galactic Council took away humans' right to choose, they would not just be implementing a different reproductive system. They would be taking away something fundamental to what made humans human. Greg did not know if the aliens would understand that. He did not know if beings who had never experienced individual choice could comprehend why it mattered so much. But in 1 week, he would find out, and the fate of human culture in the stars would be decided by 3 aliens trying to understand something they had never known. The week passed too slowly. Greg could barely focus on work. The entire colony felt the tension. People walked around with tight faces and worried eyes. Martin's group had been meeting every night, preparing arguments for why the colony should accept the lottery if the council ruled against them. Greg's group refused to even consider that outcome. On the final day, the Galactic Council called a mandatory assembly. The plaza filled with colonists and the 3 alien representatives appeared on the platform, along with Ambassador. Behind them, dozens of holographic observers materialized, representatives from multiple species, all watching to see what would be decided about the strange humans who insisted on choosing their own mates. Spoke first, its geometric patterns pulsing in complex sequences. We have completed our observation and analysis. We have studied human relationships. We have reviewed historical data. We have interviewed 147 colonists. We are prepared to present our findings. The plaza went silent. Greg Felt's hand gripped his tightly. Stepped forward, her multiple arms moving in coordinated patterns. From a genetic perspective, human mate selection appears inefficient. Pairings occur without compatibility analysis. Resources are invested in relationships that do not produce offspring. Individual variation in reproductive success is high. Greg's heart sank. This sounded like they were ruling against humans. However, continued, the long-term genetic data from Earth shows unexpected advantages. Human genetic diversity exceeds computational predictions. Genetic traits distribute based on actual environmental success rather than theoretical optimization. The system is less controlled but more adaptive. Drifted forward. From a sociological perspective, human relationships are perplexing. They require constant effort. They involve emotional complexity. They can dissolve even after significant investment. The colonists were completely still, waiting. Said, and Greg heard something in the translated voice he had not heard before, almost like wonder. Human relationships create social bonds that our models cannot fully quantify. We observed humans helping each other, not because of assigned duty, but because of chosen connection. We observed parents caring for children with intensity that cannot be explained by genetic investment alone. We observed partners supporting each other through difficulties with no logical benefit to themselves. Pulsed brightly. The legal question before us is simple. Is individual mate selection a fundamental sapient right, or merely a cultural practice that colonies should standardize? We have reviewed the data. We have observed the outcomes. We have consulted with council jurisprudence going back 4,000 years. Greg stopped breathing. No species in galactic history has ever practiced individual conscious mate selection as a biological norm, continued. This makes human claims difficult to evaluate against existing precedent. However, we have identified something significant. Human bonding strength correlates directly with choice. Brought up a display. We measured relationship stability across observed couples. Those in the proposed lottery showed predicted dissolution rates of 43%. Existing human couples who chose each other showed dissolution rates of only 12%. The difference is statistically impossible to ignore. Human children raised by parents who chose each other demonstrate higher social adaptation scores, added, higher cooperative behavior, higher creative problem solving. The choice of the parents affects the outcomes for offspring in measurable ways. Most significantly, said, its patterns becoming almost hypnotic. We asked every human interviewed if they would accept an assigned partner in exchange for guaranteed genetic optimization. 147 humans. 147 said no. This level of universal cultural consensus indicates something beyond mere preference. It indicates fundamental identity. The plaza erupted in gasps and murmurs. Greg felt tears stinging his eyes. The Galactic Council has made a determination, announced. Individual mate selection for humans is not merely cultural practice. It is intrinsic to human social bonding. It is fundamental to human identity. It is, by the definitions established in Council law, a sapient right that must be recognized and protected. Greg could not believe what he was hearing. Therefore, continued, humans are exempt from standard reproductive management protocols. The mating lottery is permanently canceled for human colonies. Humans may continue to practice individual mate selection as they have throughout their history. The plaza exploded. Colonists were cheering, crying, hugging each other. Daniel Hayes let out a whoop of joy. Amy Brooks was sobbing with relief. Even Martin looked happy, his arguments for compromise forgotten in the wave of celebration. Ambassador stepped forward. He looked at Greg directly. On behalf of thee and the Galactic Council, I must apologize. We made assumptions about your species based on our understanding of 847 others. We failed to recognize that you were fundamentally different. We tried to force you into a system that would have destroyed something essential to your nature. You didn't know, Greg said, his voice rough with emotion. How could you? We're the first species you've met that works this way. That is not an excuse, replied. We should have asked. We should have learned. We assumed universality where none existed. This will be recorded as a significant lesson for future first contact situations. Approached Greg, her compound eyes fixed on him with that intense alien stare. You should know something. Your genetic profile is not unique. Every human we tested has the same markers. The ability to form strong pair bonds through conscious choice. The valuation of emotional connection over genetic optimization. These are not individual traits. They are human traits. So I'm not special, Greg said, almost laughing. On the contrary, said, drifting closer. You were the first to articulate what all humans felt. You stood in front of the galaxy and said that choice matters more than efficiency. That caused us to look deeper. That caused us to question our assumptions. That is very special indeed. The representatives prepared to depart. Before they left, addressed the assembled colonists one final time. What we learned here will change Council policy for all future colony establishments. We will ask, not assume. We will recognize that different species may have different fundamental needs. The galaxy is more diverse than we understood. You have taught us that. As the aliens departed, the celebration continued. But Greg noticed something else happening. Several were talking quietly among themselves, looking at the humans with new understanding. The galaxy had changed today, not just for humans, but for everyone. That evening, Greg and sat in their usual spot in the park. Above them, stars filled the sky. The same stars as always, but somehow they looked different now. The entire galaxy was watching, said softly. All those species, all those civilizations, all watching to see if we'd be allowed to choose who we love. And we won, Greg replied. Did we, or did they just finally understand? Greg thought about that. Maybe both. Maybe we won because we helped them understand. Leaned against his shoulder. So what now? Back to normal life. Back to the hydroponics bay and your plants. I hope so, Greg said. I never wanted to be the face of human autonomy in the galaxy. I just wanted to choose my own girlfriend. Laughed. Well, you did that. You just happened to teach 847 species a lesson about freedom in the process. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Greg said, They're going to study us now. Other colonies will want to know about our relationship practices. Anthropologists will write papers about human mate selection. We're going to be famous." "Not us," corrected. You're the one who started this." "I didn't mean to." That might be the most human thing of all, accidentally starting a revolution because you wanted to make your own choices. Greg smiled. She was right. Humans had not come to the stars to conquer or dominate. They had come to live, to grow, to build families and communities, and they had nearly lost the right to do it their own way. But they had stood up. They had said no. They had shown the galaxy that some things matter more than efficiency or optimization. Some things, like the right to choose who you love and who you build a life with, are worth fighting for. The stars above remained unchanged, but humanity's place among them had shifted. They were still one species among 847, still new to the galactic community, still learning how things worked out here. But now the galaxy knew something about humans it had not known before. Humans could be reasonable. Humans could be diplomatic. Humans could cooperate and compromise. But on the things that mattered most, the things that made them human, they would not bend. Greg looked at the woman he had chosen and who had chosen him back, and felt grateful. Grateful for freedom. Grateful for choice. Grateful for being human in a galaxy that was only just beginning to understand what that meant.